At Carnegie Mellon University in the late 1990s, a group of young men calmly predicted how they would act in morally difficult situations. Then they were put into a state of intense physical arousal, and they answered the same questions again. Their answers changed so much that the calm men and the aroused men looked like two different people. The same man, the same brain, the same values, yet the predictions of his own behavior doubled. He couldn't feel the change coming. He couldn't imagine it from the calm side. George Lowenstein, the researcher behind that study, gave this phenomenon a name: the hot-cold empathy gap. It is the failure to predict or understand your own future visceral states. When you are calm, you underestimate how much hunger, anger, exhaustion, or desire will control you later. When you are starving, you cannot remember what it felt like to be full. When you are well-fed, you cannot believe you will ever be starving again. The gap is not a lack of willpower. It is a structural error in how the brain forecasts its own future. Why does this happen? The brain doesn't store feelings like files on a hard drive. It stores a compressed summary, a label, a rough sketch. You remember that you were hungry yesterday, but you don't re-experience the gnawing in your stomach. You remember being furious last week, but the heat in your chest is gone. That's the problem. Accurate prediction of a future feeling requires the brain to simulate that feeling, and simulation requires the feeling itself. No arousal, no accurate simulation. When you plan your tomorrow from the comfort of today, your brain is building a forecast with a broken thermometer. Here's a second line of evidence. Researchers have used cold water to put people in physical pain, then asked them to predict how much pain they'd tolerate in a future session. Pain-free participants consistently forecast that future pain will be more bearable than people actually find it. Meanwhile, participants currently in pain predict that the future pain will be worse than it turns out to be. Both groups are wrong, and they're wrong in opposite directions. Each state acts like a prison, blocking any accurate view of the other. The same pattern shows up in anger. People who are calm say they would never shout at a customer, never slam a door, never send a furious email. But anger isn't a thought that can be talked down. It's a physical state, a rush of adrenaline, a narrowing of attention, a body preparing for conflict. When you are in it, your calm self's promises mean nothing. Experiments on reactive aggression find that provoked participants behave far more aggressively than unprovoked participants predicted they would. The calm mind always believes it can handle provocation gracefully. The hot mind always proves it wrong. Hunger works the same way, and its effects reach further than your stomach. In 2011, researchers examined over 1,000 parole decisions made by Israeli judges. The judges reviewed cases in sessions separated by food breaks. At the start of each session, after a meal, the judges granted parole roughly 65% of the time. As the session wore on, that number fell steadily, dropping to near zero just before the next break. The same judge, the same legal standards, the same arguments. The only difference was whether his blood sugar was stable. Nobody believes hunger changes legal judgment. The data says it does. Now take that insight back to your own life. Every New Year's resolution, every promise to wake up early, every vow to skip dessert is a forecast made by a calm, fed, rested person. The person who has to execute that promise is hungry, tired, or stressed. Those two people do not share the same body chemistry. They barely share the same brain. So when you fail to keep a promise to yourself, you call yourself weak. But the real mistake happened earlier, when you predicted that a hungry version of you would behave like a fed version of you. It's a prediction error, not a character flaw. So why doesn't experience fix this? You've been hungry 1,000 times. You know what it does. Yet every time you shop while starving, you overbuy. Every time you text while angry, you regret it. The answer is that visceral states decay from memory far faster than they decay from the body. The label stays, the sensation fades. You remember that the meeting was frustrating, but your shoulders don't relive the tension. And without that physical echo, your brain treats the past episode as an intellectual fact rather than a bodily truth. The cold you can't take the hot you seriously because the hot you doesn't feel real to anyone who isn't currently hot. There is one asymmetry worth knowing. The gap is not symmetric. When you are in a hot state, you overestimate how long the heat will last. You think this anger will define your week. You think this hunger is the end of the world. But when you cool off, you swing the other way entirely. You say it was no big deal. Both are distortions, but the hot state is at least pointing at something real. The cold state, the state you spend most of your life in, is blind to the existence of heat altogether. That's the dangerous direction, because you make most of your future plans while cold. The gap even contaminates morality. Psychologists have shown that people feeling disgust, whether from a foul smell or a dirty room, issue harsher moral judgments about strangers. They punish small infractions more severely. They judge innocent actions as suspicious. When people are calm, they predict that disgust would have almost no effect on their moral reasoning. They're wrong. The hot state quietly rewrites your sense of right and wrong, and you don't feel it happening. You just feel certain that the person in front of you deserves worse. Can you close the gap? Partially. The most reliable tool is precommitment. Ulysses bound himself to the mast so he couldn't steer into the siren's song. You can do the same. Shop only after a meal, not before. Write angry emails, save them as drafts, and require a 12-hour wait. Ignore New Year's resolutions and instead set up automatic transfers, automatic gym appointments, automatic phone locks. The goal is to make the decision at the cold moment, so the hot moment has no authority. People who do this are not more disciplined. They just stopped trusting their future selves to make good decisions. The same logic changes how you treat other people. When a colleague snaps at a meeting, your calm brain says they are irrational, unprofessional, weak-willed. But they're not making a decision. They're in a hot state, as real to them as the floor beneath their feet. They cannot feel what your calm state feels, and you cannot feel what their heated state feels. That's the empathy gap working between people, not just within one person. Calling them dramatic is exactly as accurate as a full person calling a starving person weak for thinking about food. Understanding the gap makes it harder to judge others harshly, because you know your own moral high ground is just a state you're currently in. There's a deeper reason the gap runs so wide. Brain imaging research shows that when people think about their future selves, the patterns of activity look less like thinking about themselves and more like thinking about a stranger. The same is true when you think about your past self. Your brain does not treat the future you as you. It treats the future you as someone else, someone estimated to be less deserving of your concern. That's the neurological root of the problem. Every self-control failure is a conflict between two different people, and the person who sets the rules is not the person who has to follow them. The promise you made this morning to be patient, to say no, to start training, was made by a person who was rested, fed, and unbothered. The person who has to keep that promise will be short on sleep, low on glucose, and heavy with stress. Those two people don't share a temperament. They barely share a memory. But you get to design the meeting between them. You can build the road so that the future you doesn't have to be strong. You can remove the snack, block the app, move the alarm clock across the room. The hot you will resent the cold you for these tricks. Let that resentment happen. It's part of the plan. The lesson of the empathy gap is simple. Stop trusting the person you are right now to know what the person you will become actually needs. Treat your future self like a guest you're preparing for, not a soldier you're commanding. The promises you keep will not be the ones backed by iron will. They'll be the ones you designed while you could still think.